Hey guys, tonight we wander into torchlit medieval alleys, the kind where shadows cling to the cobblestones and every creak of a wooden shutter makes you glance over your shoulder. Lanterns dangle from crooked beams glowing like beacons, and if you follow the amber glow long enough, you'll stumble upon a doorway humming with music, laughter, and the faint smell of wine that's been watered down a bit too much. These aren't just taverns, these are the brothels of medieval Europe, places that were at once forbidden and fully sanctioned, dangerous and strangely safe. And just to set expectations, if you were dropped into this scene tonight, you probably wouldn't survive the smell alone, never mind the politics. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the street, the sound of clogs on wet stone echoing in your ears. The medieval night is anything but quiet. There's the braying of a donkey pulling a cart of refuse, the rattle of a guard's pike against his armor, and somewhere, laughter that climbs a little too high before snapping into silence. The alleys feel like a maze designed by someone who hated straight lines. Turn left, then right, then left again, and suddenly you're in a square lit by torches, with one building brighter than the rest. The lantern swinging outside bears a crude painting, maybe of a red shoe, a crescent moon, or even a woman's face signs that hint, without naming, what waits inside. In many European cities, these brothels weren't secret at all. Authorities licensed them, taxed them, and sometimes even dictated what they should look like. Picture it. The same city council that fined a man for letting his pigs run loose also voted to approve a new house of pleasure. That's bureaucracy for you. And yet, walking into that lantern-lit door, you feel both a strange invitation and a warning. Inside lies warmth, wine, and maybe comfort. But also gossip, disease, and the watchful eyes of people who might report you to the bishop tomorrow. A mainstream historical fact here. In places like Cologne and Strasbourg, municipal brothels were not just tolerated, but actually built with city funds. Authorities argued it was better to keep vice contained in one place than to have it spill into every tavern and street corner. Think of it as medieval zoning laws, except instead of arguing about where a Starbucks goes, they debated where to put the official brothel. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some towns, brothels flew colored flags or hung lanterns in certain shapes so that newcomers could find them without asking awkward questions. Imagine trying to explain that to your mom. Oh, the triangle lantern? No, I thought it was just a bakery. As you step closer, the smell hits you first. It's a mix of sweat, wood smoke, and cheap perfume made from rosemary steeped in vinegar. Inside, you might hear a lute plucking away, voices raised in bawdy songs, or dice clattering across a table. Brothels weren't only about what you think. They doubled as entertainment halls where men could gamble, drink, and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But historians still argue whether these early city brothels really improved public safety or just made authorities feel like they were in control. On one hand, they did create zones where violence could be monitored. On the other, putting desperate people in one building rarely makes life less desperate. That debate continues, echoing in modern policies too. As you walk deeper into this scene, your eyes adjust to the dim candlelight flickering against plaster walls. You can almost feel the brush of rough woolen curtains against your fingertips. Laughter rises and falls like waves, sometimes genuine, sometimes forced, always with an edge of tension. Because in this place, pleasure is a business, and the women running it know just how dangerous that business can be. You catch the eye of a woman leaning against the doorway. Her gaze is steady, calculating, a little amused that you look nervous. She isn't a worker. She's the one who owns the place. Tonight, she controls the warmth inside, the money exchanged, the rules followed or broken. Tomorrow, she may be called before the city council, or threatened by a drunk with too much to prove. For now, though, she rules this patch of flickering light in the medieval dark. And as you stand there, just outside, you realize that this one glowing doorway is only the beginning of the story. One of survival, power, hypocrisy, and the thin line women walked when they ran houses the world both relied on and condemned. You're still in the street, the lantern swinging above your head, and you can't help but imagine the paperwork that gave this little building its glow. Because here's the strange truth. Many of these brothels weren't simply tolerated. They were actually licensed by the very councils that claim to uphold morality. Picture it. A group of stern-faced city fathers seated at a long oak table, quills scratching as they pass ordinances about market stalls, chimney repairs, and brothel regulations. You almost hear one clearing his throat and saying, "Yes, about the matter of the red light house on Fisherman's Lane." And so the stage is set. You peer into the dusty parchment world of medieval bureaucracy, where sin was weighed not in heaven but in shillings, pennies, or florins. Cities across Europe, Avignon, Toulouse, London, Frankfurt issued licenses to brothels with the same matter-of-fact attitude they used for bakeries or butchers. They argued it kept order. If men had a regulated outlet, then supposedly they'd be less likely to bother honest women. It's the medieval version of saying, better one noisy nightclub at the edge of town than drunken brawls in every tavern. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the 14th century, the city of Toulouse actually built and owned a municipal brothel, complete with regulations about prices and opening hours. The profits went directly into the city treasury. That's right, you could theoretically complain to the city clerk if your evening was overpriced. Of course, the official line was always, "We don't endorse sin, we just manage it." But you can almost picture the smirk behind those words. The church condemned lust in sermons, while city treasurers quietly counted the coins that lust provided. And then comes a quirky tidbit. In some towns, councils required brothel keepers to hang distinctive signs so there was no confusion. One regulation demanded that the brothel display a red lantern during the night and a wooden cuckoo during the day. Imagine strolling past with your groceries. "Oh, look! There's the cuckoo house, don't make eye contact, children." As you drift closer to the imagined council chamber, you can feel the tension in the air. Licensing wasn't just about money, it was about power. By granting a license, the council held a leash. The madam might have her house legally sanctioned, but she also owed the authorities constant obedience. If she failed to pay her taxes or allowed illegal gambling, her protection could vanish overnight. You picture yourself as one of those women approaching the council, petition in hand, trying to smile politely at men who looked at you with both disdain and curiosity. It must have been a performance showing humility while also bargaining hard enough to secure the right to run your business. Historians still argue whether women had much agency in this licensing process or whether the decisions were entirely shaped by male officials. The documents we have are frustratingly silent about how much negotiation really went on. The danger in all this bureaucracy is subtle. Yes, the paper shield of a license kept your brothel safe from immediate raids, but it also made you visible. Too visible. Authorities knew exactly who you were, where you operated, and how much you owed. In a time of moral reform, that meant your license could become evidence against you instead of protection. You pause, imagining the scene. A summer evening in a medieval city. The bells toll from the cathedral, market stalls close, and in a small chamber near the town hall, officials debate how many pennies per customer a brothel should pay the city. The lanterns outside sway in the breeze, signaling to passers-by that business goes on, no matter how pious the sermons might be. And here's a small aside, because you can't help but notice the irony. This is basically medieval public policy wrapped in velvet curtains. Today's cities debate zoning for liquor stores or late-night clubs. Their ancestors argued about brothels. Some things never change except maybe the smell of wet wool in the council chamber. As you drift away from the paperwork and back toward the street, the lantern sways overhead again. Now, you understand that the glow of that light isn't just an invitation. It's proof of paperwork, taxes, and a city's quiet nod. The brothel lives not only in the shadows, but also in the council's ledgers, its existence balanced between survival and scrutiny. And as you prepare to step inside, you realize that the license may promise safety, but safety in medieval Europe always came at a price. The lantern creaks on its iron hook as you finally step across the threshold. The air changes immediately warmer, smokier, thick with a sweetness that might be honeyed wine or just the perfume of dried herbs smoldering on a brazier. But your eyes land not on the girls laughing in the corner or the dice clattering across the table. No. What catches your attention is the woman standing behind it all. She's not serving drinks, not dancing, not even raising her voice. She simply watches, chin lifted, a quiet force in a room full of noise. This is the madam, the woman who runs the house. It might surprise you that in much of medieval Europe, brothels weren't typically run by men. Sure, soldiers, clergy, and merchants were steady customers, but the day-to-day management, the keys, the rules, the purse strings was often in the hands of women. These women weren't naive. They had usually lived the trade themselves before stepping into the role of keeper, and they knew every trick of survival in a city that gave with one hand and threatened with the other. Your mainstream historical fact here. In cities like Nuremberg and London, records show that female brothel keepers, sometimes called abbesses or mothers, were officially named in legal documents. They had to pay the licensing fees directly, and in some cases, they even signed contracts with city officials about how their houses should be run. Their names, written in those dry municipal registers, remind you that these weren't shadowy figures, they were businesswomen, recognized by the law even if condemned in sermons. Of course, recognition didn't mean respect. That's where the danger crept in. A woman might run a profitable house one year, then suddenly find herself accused of harboring thieves or spreading disease the next. Being visible meant being vulnerable. You can almost hear her voice in the candlelit room, calm but sharp, telling a drunk customer to mind his manners or risk the doorman tossing him into the street. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some madams were so influential that they earned nicknames among city folk. In a few towns, the locals jokingly referred to them as queens of their quarter. Not queens with crowns, mind you, but queens of negotiation. Queens of keeping peace among rowdy men. Queens of knowing which guard could be bribed with a jug of wine. Historians still argue whether these women truly held power, or whether their authority was only tolerated until it became inconvenient. On paper, a brothel keeper could manage her household, employ staff, and protect her workers. In reality, her influence always hinged on the shifting winds of politics and morality. One bishop's crackdown or one wealthy rival's complaint could undo years of careful balancing. You glance again around the room. Notice how she positions herself not in the thick of the crowd, but with a view of the door, the stairs, the purse of coins being counted in the corner. Every decision is calculation. She's not just running an inn with extra services. She's managing security, health, reputation, and finances, all while keeping her workers loyal enough not to slip away in the night. The danger for her is layered. There's the obvious risk of violence from customers, the looming threat of raids by moral reformers, and even betrayal from within. But there's also a quieter, constant danger, being dismissed as disposable by the very system that licensed her. The council could profit from her today and condemn her tomorrow, and she knew it. That's why her gaze stays sharp, why her hand never strays far from the keys at her belt. You catch her eye for a moment, and there's no mistaking the message. She knows more than she says, sees more than she lets on, and has already measured you up before you opened your mouth. She doesn't need approval, but she demands a kind of respect born not of title or wealth, but of survival. As the dice clatter again and laughter bursts out across the smoky hall, you realize this isn't just her workplace, it's her battlefield. And she, the woman at the helm, stands as both captain and shield, steering her house through waves of danger and opportunity that never quite settle. You lean against a rough-hewn post, feeling the residual warmth of the fire licking the timber walls, and you start to notice the rhythm of the place, the ebb and flow of coin, gossip, and whispered negotiations. Money is everywhere here, not just in the obvious jingling purses, but in quiet exchanges behind closed doors, in the favors called in the tabs left unpaid with the promise of repayment tomorrow. Running a brothel wasn't simply about opening doors. It was about orchestrating an entire miniature economy under the constant watch of law and morality. Let's start with the obvious. The madam had to manage the money her workers earned. Each client brought in payment, and each worker took a share, but the house always demanded its cut. You can almost hear her instructing. Keep that coin on the table, and don't let the boy skim from the drawer. There were fees to the city, bribes for guards, tips for musicians, and sometimes even hush money to quell a complaint from a neighbor or a patron with a grudge. A mainstream historical fact. In late medieval England, brothel licenses came with a fixed tax, sometimes paid quarterly, which meant a madam had to keep careful records of each customer just to satisfy city officials. A miscalculation could land her house under investigation or worse, closed entirely. But there's a quirk here. Some madams develop creative ways to balance the books. In certain Italian cities, a worker might be encouraged to borrow a coin from a customer's purse, as long as it was later counted in the house ledger, and the madam ensured it didn't cross into theft legally. Historians still argue whether such practices were widespread or just exceptional cleverness by particularly cunning women. Either way, it demonstrates the ingenuity required to survive in this line of work. Beyond simple accounting, the madam also managed the house's reputation, which was inseparable from its profitability. A trustworthy establishment attracted higher-paying clients and discouraged thugs and troublemakers. You notice the rules. No arguments in the hall, no theft, no violence. Violations could mean expulsion, fines, or even a trip to the local court. Reputation was currency as real as any coin, and keeping it intact required careful observation of every whisper, every look, and every transaction. And then there's negotiation with external forces. Guards might be persuaded with a small gift to overlook a noisy patron. Guild officials might be mollified with pastries or a small bribe. Neighbors could be managed with hospitality or subtle threats. It's a delicate dance. Your quirky tidbit. Some madams kept small ledgers not just of income but of favors owed from influential men in the city, a kind of medieval influencer marketing. They knew which favors could be called in during times of trouble, and which should be left dormant. Balancing finances also meant managing risk. Disease, theft, or a sudden crackdown could drain the house's coffers overnight. You watch her as she counts coins, eyes darting around the room, fingers moving quickly yet confidently. Each decision, how many patrons to admit, how to distribute tips, how to respond to a guard's complaints, is part of a larger calculation. In a way, running a brothel is a high-stakes game of chess, played on a floor, sticky with spilled wine. Historians still argue whether this economic acumen granted madams true independence or simply made them highly skilled servants to a system built to control vice. On one hand, they handled complex finances, negotiated legalities, and protected their workers. On the other, their authority was conditional, their license revocable, and their survival precarious. As you step back and take in the room the laughter, the music, the coins exchanged, you see clearly that a madam's role is more than managing lust. It's economics, diplomacy, risk management, and strategy, all performed under a fragile shield of legality. And you begin to understand that running a brothel wasn't just about keeping doors open, it was about keeping balance in a world that could tip violently at any moment. You take a slow breath and let your eyes wander over the room again, noticing the finer details, the way women adjust their bodices just enough to signal confidence without arrogance. The subtle exchange of glances that communicates who's new, who's trusted, and who's off limits. It's not just performance for the customers. It's a strategy for maintaining respect, both inside the house and in the wider city. The madam knows that how her women present themselves affects not only income, but the reputation of the house itself. Fashion was power. Clothing signaled status, wealth, and sometimes even a worker's rank within the house. Mainstream fact. In 15th century France, municipal regulations sometimes dictated the colors and styles that brothel women could wear, ostensibly to distinguish them from respectable citizens, but also to create a clear social hierarchy. The madam had to balance these rules with her own judgment, choosing fabrics and trims that suggested allure without crossing into scandal. Too plain, and clients might scoff. Too extravagant, and the town council might take offense. You notice the quirky side of these regulations. In some cities, women were required to wear a specific badge, sometimes a small piece of colored cloth or a ribbon to mark their trade. Imagine turning up at the market and seeing a line of ribbons fluttering in the breeze. each one signaling a different level of skill, experience, or seniority. It's like a medieval dress code meets an early loyalty program. The madam's role in fashion extended beyond mere compliance. She could dictate subtle touches that increased respectability or encouraged higher-paying clients. Jewelry, hairstyling, and even the scent used in the house were carefully curated. A certain perfume might indicate a house's affiliation with the city council or a wealthy patron. A particular hairstyle could suggest a worker's seniority and trustworthiness. Scholars still debate whether this was a conscious marketing strategy or an organic evolution of social norms, but either way, it mattered. You watch her now, adjusting a candle to cast flattering light on her employees as they prepare for the evening. Her eye catches a slight misstep in posture, and she leans over a worker with gentle correction, not chastising, but guiding, as a chess player might adjust a pawn for optimal positioning. This is not vanity. It is the calculated presentation of respectability, a survival tactic in a world where appearances could mean the difference between protection and persecution. Even the layout of the house is a statement. The front room, where clients first enter, is warm, tidy, and welcoming. The back corridors, quieter and dimmer, allow for discretion and privacy. The madam positions herself strategically between these spaces, controlling flow, overseeing transactions, and mediating disputes before they spiral. In a sense, she is both stage manager and security chief, blending aesthetics with authority. You catch a hint of humor in the way she instructs her staff. A flick of the wrist here, a wink there, small cues that establish hierarchy without heavy-handedness. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. First, the clumsy servant tripping over a rug. Second, a patron mispronouncing the name of a wine. Third, a clever quip from the madam about city taxes that would be too cutting to voice aloud. Humor softens tension, but also reinforces control. She can laugh at the chaos without losing it. And as you absorb the scene, you realize that fashioning respectability isn't shallow vanity. It's an exercise in power, subtle and sophisticated. By shaping how her house and employees are perceived, the madam navigates the treacherous line between social condemnation and municipal protection, between allure and authority. In a world that measures women by appearance, she manipulates it to her advantage, turning a potentially dangerous vulnerability into a tool of influence. You can feel the shift in the room as evening deepens, the laughter gets louder, the dice more persistent, and the shadows crawl along the walls like liquid smoke. But behind the warmth and chatter, there's a subtle tension, a hum of danger that never truly disappears. Running a brothel in medieval Europe wasn't just about coins and appearances, it was about constantly managing threats, both visible and invisible. You sense it in the madam's posture, in the way she glances toward the door, noting every entrance and exit. Street violence is a fact of life here. Drunkards stumble into the alley, some looking for a fight, some lost, some simply curious. Thieves lurk nearby, hoping to snatch purses or disrupt the house's rhythm. Even loyal patrons can turn suddenly aggressive if a debt is disputed or a slight perceived. A mainstream historical fact. City ordinances in Florence and Nuremberg required brothel owners to keep watchmen on the door to protect both workers and clients from violence. These were often men employed by the madam herself, trusted to maintain order but also to act discreetly. And yet, there's a quirk in medieval danger management. Some madams train their staff in subtle intimidation techniques, like a certain way of folding hands or leaning into a client's space to signal authority. It's not quite self-defense, more psychological, making the would-be troublemaker hesitate long enough to think twice. You might even spot it. A gentle tilt of the chin, a measured glance, a voice that sounds soft but carries the weight of warning. Historians still argue whether brothels genuinely reduced street violence or merely concentrated it. On one hand, having a regulated house meant fewer men wandering drunkenly through the city in search of illicit pleasure. On the other, the concentration of money, bodies, and desire sometimes attracted the very criminals it was supposed to contain. You notice it in the way patrons are monitored, coins are counted, and exits observed. Survival required vigilance, constant, and unyielding. Even the law can be a threat. Gods who are supposed to protect the house might turn on it if bribed, insulted, or pressured by moral authorities. You notice the subtle exchange of glances as a guard passes by the lantern-lit doorway. One wink, one nod, a silent negotiation of trust and caution. The madam must always balance legality and bribery, authority and diplomacy. And then there's the unpredictable human factor. Rival madams might stir trouble, jealous neighbors might whisper complaints, and sometimes even workers under pressure, desperation, or coercion could disrupt the delicate equilibrium. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, madams kept small jars of vinegar or hot pepper near entrances, not for punishment, but as a deterrent to drunk intruders. The smell alone could send a miscreant running without a fight. You realize danger here isn't always dramatic. It's layered, subtle, and persistent, a constant background note that shapes every decision. The placement of furniture, the order of service, the timing of wine refills, even the way laughter is moderated, all of it contributes to survival. The madam's gaze sweeps over the room, catching a misstep, anticipating conflict before it happens. And as you stand there, breathing in the heady mix of candle smoke, perfume, and wine, you understand this balance of danger and control is why the madam commands respect. Her power is fragile, yes, but it is earned through vigilance, foresight, and the constant ability to read both people and situations. In this dimly lit world, safety is never guaranteed. It is managed carefully, cleverly, and relentlessly. You hear the distant toll of the cathedral bell echoing against the cobblestones and the timbered walls of the quarter. The sound reminds you that the city above the brothel is never far from judgment, moral, spiritual, and occasionally physical. The church's gaze hovers over these establishments constantly, a mix of condemnation, curiosity, and sometimes quiet complicity. You notice a priest in his dark robe lingering near the square, ostensibly to deliver sermons, but his eyes flick toward the glowing lanterns with a mixture of fascination and disapproval. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Many European cities required brothels to operate under the supervision of church authorities who would conduct periodic inspections to ensure that morality, or at least appearances, was maintained. Clergy could levy fines, demand prayers, or impose penance, blending governance with spiritual oversight. Some priests even acted as intermediaries between city councils and madams, negotiating rules or resolving disputes. Imagine a bishop tapping his finger against a ledger while also judging which women were sinning too openly, a blend of bureaucracy and moral theater. And yet, the church's involvement could be paradoxical. Quirky tidbit. In certain Italian towns, it was believed that clergy occasionally received free or discreet services from licensed brothels. Of course, no one ever wrote this in official records, but the whispers circulated in taverns and among city council members. You can almost imagine a monk ducking through a back alley, cloak fluttering, muttering prayers under his breath while entering a familiar doorway. Historians still argue whether the church's oversight genuinely reformed behavior or simply allowed the city to regulate vice more efficiently. Some scholars suggest that priests' involvement was less about moral concern and more about maintaining social order or even increasing revenue streams indirectly through fines. You notice the tension in the air as a woman glances toward the door where a priest is passing by, adjusting her posture as if to signal civility while maintaining her authority inside. It isn't just about sermons. Clergy could summon madams to court for moral infractions, questioning the management of workers, the conduct of patrons, or even the arrangement of furniture. The madam had to present herself with calm confidence, knowing that her house's reputation, and sometimes her license, depended on the outcome. She might bow slightly, acknowledge the priest's presence, and continue her work with the same quiet authority she exercised over the staff. You notice the subtle negotiations that happen in plain sight. A whispered word to a local monk here, a small coin slipped into a palm there, a nod that conveys compliance while asserting independence. The church is a constant presence, a force that enforces morality while occasionally turning a blind eye when expedient. And the madam must read these signals as carefully as she reads her patrons, balancing obedience with self-preservation. In a way, the church's looming presence shapes every interaction. You watch a patron hesitate, sensing the judgmental stare from a nearby cleric. You notice a worker adjusting her jewelry, aware that certain colors or styles might draw unwanted attention. Every small decision in the brothel is filtered through the lens of morality, oversight, and the subtle threat of spiritual or legal consequence. And as you stand there, the candlelight flickering across plaster walls and the faint smell of incense mixing with smoke, you realize that running a brothel under clerical observation requires diplomacy as much as strength. The madam navigates a world of prayers, sermons, and watchful eyes, where obedience can coexist with cunning, and moral authority is both a threat and a shield. This tension, delicate and ever-present, is just another layer in the complex landscape of medieval brothel life. You follow the faint clatter of coins as it echoes through the brothel, winding past candlelit alcoves and the smell of spiced wine.
It's here you begin to see just how entwined these houses were with the city's finances. Taxes weren't a vague obligation. They were tangible, immediate, and sometimes life-defining.
Each
coin that changed hands in the house could end up in the city treasury, filling ledgers and influencing municipal decisions far beyond the walls of the brothel itself. A mainstream historical fact. In 16th century Venice, brothel keepers were required to pay taxes directly to the city, and the revenue was considered a significant portion of municipal income. Some towns even earmarked this money for public works roads, or the repair of walls. So, in a strange way, your pleasure was contributing to city infrastructure. You might smile at that. The next time someone complains about taxes, you could remind them they're indirectly funding medieval sanitation or a poorly built bridge. And there's a quirky tidbit here. In Nuremberg, there were occasions where brothel taxes were used to fund fireworks displays during festivals. Imagine the paradox. Citizens cheering over skyward pyrotechnics, entirely unaware that their awe was paid for by what some moralists called the city's sin fund.
You can almost hear a madam muttering under her breath.
At least someone enjoys the fruits of my labor. Historians still argue whether these taxes empowered madams or simply trapped them. On one hand, paying fees regularly could earn a degree of protection from city authorities.
On the other hand,
legitimizing the house and its staff.
Incorrect accounting,
on the other hand,
any misstep, delayed payment,
incorrect accounting, or dispute over the amount
you watch a madam
could invite penalties or even temporary closure.
Aware that every
you watch a madam tally coins with a precise hand,
and control
aware that every florin represents survival, influence, and control over her world. Managing taxes wasn't purely about obedience, strategy.
Negotiate rates.
Madams often had to forecast income, negotiate rates, sometimes petition for reduced payments during slow seasons or plagues. This required a keen understanding of both municipal law and human behavior. A kind of early economics mixed with diplomacy. You notice subtle signs of tension in her face as she counts coins, weighing which payments can be delayed and which must be prioritized to maintain favor with officials.
There were tithes to the church,
but taxes weren't the only financial worry.
Unexpected fees.
There were tithes to the church, bribes to guards, and unexpected fees levied by rival guilds or city officers.
Madams reportedly kept a separate emergency jar for
in some towns,
fines,
madams reportedly kept a separate emergency jar for unpredictable fines, filled with coins stashed behind bricks or under floorboards. It's not exactly high finance, but in a medieval context, it was a lifeline. And so you realize the house is not just a place of pleasure, it's a microcosm of civic life.
Every transaction,
every coin, every exchange touches the machinery of the city, linking the madam and her staff to taxes,
and the fluctuating favor of municipal
Economic
authorities.
acumen was as crucial as charisma,
and mismanagement
could have immediate tangible consequences. As you step back and watch, the madam's fingers brush the coins with both familiarity and reverence. She's the keeper not just of pleasure, but of the city's small, delicate economy. And in that role, she wields a subtle but undeniable power, the power to keep her house alive. Her staff employed, in her corner of the city humming in rhythm with the ebb and flow of both money and moral oversight.
The candlelight flickers across the walls again, and your eyes catch something you hadn't noticed before. the way women in the house look at one another. There's a rhythm to it, a quiet language that isn't spoken aloud, a mixture of camaraderie, caution, and sometimes competition. In a brothel, alliances are as important as currency, and the madam orchestrates these relationships with as much care as she manages finances or reputation. You feel the pulse of this strange sisterhood, unspoken but essential to the survival of everyone inside. A mainstream historical fact. In many cities, brothel workers often formed close-knit networks under the supervision of the madam. These networks provided protection, advice, and even a social structure in a world that otherwise marginalized them. Workers relied on each other to manage difficult patrons, maintain safety, and navigate city ordinances. Their relationships were part social, part strategic, and always under the madam's watchful eye. But there's a quirky layer here. In some towns, madams encouraged playful rank badges among their workers, tiny ornaments or colored ribbons that indicated experience, seniority, or loyalty. It created a micro-hierarchy that was part game, part motivation, and sometimes part gentle intimidation. You might imagine a new worker glancing nervously at a seasoned colleague, unsure if she's being evaluated or merely observed in the grand choreography of the house. Historians still argue whether these internal hierarchies empowered workers or reinforced the madam's authority in ways that limited autonomy. Some suggest the structure was a way for women to support one another. Others see it as a subtle system of control that ensured the madam maintained ultimate power over the household. Either way, you notice the careful glances, the nods, the whispered corrections, and understand that this sisterhood is as functional as it is personal. The madam's role is central. She mediates disputes, assigns duties, and monitors interactions. A sharp word from her can calm a simmering rivalry. A wink can signal a favor or a warning. Loyalty and trust are negotiated constantly. You sense the undercurrent. Betrayal is possible, but so is solidarity. You see it in the way one worker discreetly offers a comforting touch to another who's just been scolded, a gesture that conveys, "I've got your back." And humor? Even here, it sneaks in. Quirky tidbit. Some madams encouraged playful pranks between workers, like harmlessly switching aprons or staging mock client complaints to see how quickly a colleague could react. 3 laughs and 1,000 words. A spilled cup of wine, a worker stumbling over her own foot, a whispered joke about the city council's obsession with red ribbons. These moments reinforce bonds while reminding everyone of the madam's oversight. As you observe, it becomes clear that this sisterhood isn't simply social, it's survival. Navigating client moods, rivalries, city regulations, and the ever-present threat of moral scrutiny requires a network that's loyal, disciplined, and subtly organized. The madam's genius lies not just in her personal power, but in her ability to orchestrate this human machinery, turning a potentially chaotic household into a resilient community. You step back and realize, in this place of candles, laughter, and risk, the quiet, interwoven relationships between women are as crucial as any law, license, or ledger. Without this delicate fabric of trust and rivalry, the house couldn't function, and the madam's authority would collapse. Sisterhood here is strategy, protection, and power rolled into one, a subtle force shaping every corner of this lantern-lit world. You drift toward the back rooms now, past the main hall where coins and laughter still mingle, and you notice something unexpected. The quiet corners, the rooms slightly removed from the public eye, where a different sort of power resides. Here, the brothel becomes more than a place of work or commerce. It is, for some women, a refuge, a sanctuary from the harshness of the outside world, from abusive husbands, relentless poverty, or judgmental neighbors. The flickering candlelight reveals whispered conversations, small comforts, and a kind of resilience that surprises you. A mainstream historical fact. In many medieval towns, brothels were among the few places where women could exercise agency, earn a living, and live independently of male relatives or employers. The madam provided shelter, work, and sometimes basic protection against threats both legal and personal. For women escaping violence or destitution, these houses could offer stability and relative safety, though the world outside rarely ceased to press in. There's a quirky nuance here. Some madams would maintain a safe room for particularly vulnerable workers, a space where they could rest or recover after a particularly difficult encounter with a patron or a rough night in the city. It wasn't widely advertised. It wasn't part of city ordinances. It was just another layer of ingenuity and care woven into the fabric of the house. You can almost see a worker sinking onto a wooden bench, sighing and realizing that for the first time in weeks, she isn't under immediate threat. Historians still argue whether brothels function primarily as sites of exploitation or as protective micro-communities. The truth is likely somewhere in between, a place where survival and commerce intersect, and where women navigated layers of power and danger with remarkable skill. You notice the careful negotiations that happen even here: who gets what room, which worker handles which patron, which entrance is safest. These are decisions infused with both practical and emotional intelligence. The madam's role in these quieter spaces is subtle but crucial. She observes, advises, and sometimes intervenes, balancing authority with empathy. A sharp warning to a disruptive patron, a discreet adjustment to sleeping arrangements, or simply the offer of a listening ear. Each action reinforces the house as a haven. And yet, even in this sanctuary, danger is never far. Disease, theft, or legal trouble can strike without warning. A quirky tidbit. Some houses even maintained small libraries or collections of devotional texts and poems, allowing women a rare chance for private reflection or education. Imagine a worker stealing a few quiet moments to read by candlelight, a medieval novel or prayer book tucked beneath a coarse blanket. Humor and humanity sneak in here too. A whispered joke shared between roommates about the city's latest odd ordinance, or a playful tease about the madam's obsession with tidiness. And as you wander these private rooms, you begin to understand that brothels weren't just workplaces, they were multifaceted social environments. They offered shelter, structure, and a network of support in a society that often denied women agency. In the quiet, away from lanterns and patrons, the house transforms into a space where strategy, compassion, and survival coexist. The flicker of candlelight highlights the duality: risk and refuge, authority and camaraderie, commerce and care. The madam orchestrates it all, a conductor of both the public and private realms, keeping her household functioning, protected, and, against the odds, human. It's here you feel the complexity most clearly. Brothels were as much about survival and sanctuary as they were about desire or profit. The street outside hums with festival energy, and you feel the pull of noise, color, and chaos. It's carnival time, and the brothel quarter is no longer hidden in shadows. It is thrust into the public eye, part spectacle, part performance. Lanterns sway in rhythm with the music. Banners flutter above cobblestones, and you notice the madam stepping outside, leading a small parade of her women through cheering crowds. This is a rare moment when the boundaries between license, social taboo, and celebration blur, and the madam navigates it with both confidence and flair. Mainstream historical fact. During carnival seasons in medieval Europe, brothel women often participated in public celebrations. Cities like Venice and Strasbourg allowed certain houses to display their staff in processions, a mixture of sanctioned performance and strategic marketing. These public appearances reinforced visibility, attracted clients, and, surprisingly, created a space where women could assert a kind of social presence otherwise denied to them. And yet, there's a quirky, almost absurd element. In some towns, the parade involved symbolic acts like carrying oversized pastries, mock scepters, or even small effigies. These were playful gestures, part tradition, part subtle critique of authority, a wink to both the city and its moral overseers. You might imagine a worker balancing a comically large loaf of bread on her head, dodging the cheers and laughter while keeping pace with the procession. Historians still argue whether these displays empowered women or merely objectified them further. Some suggest that the visibility gave madams and their staff a political edge, allowing them to negotiate privileges or protections with city authorities. Others see it as a performative reinforcement of stereotypes, a reminder that these women were entertaining curiosities first, businesswomen second. Either way, the parade is a calculated dance of risk, visibility, and social signaling. The madam's role here is delicate. She positions her workers strategically, ensuring the crowd's attention remains respectful or at least manageable while signaling her authority over the group. She coordinates with musicians, city officials, and sometimes rival households, turning the parade into a controlled display of power and presence. You notice her subtle commands, a tilt of the hand, a nod, a raised eyebrow, gestures that orchestrate behavior without a word spoken. And humor sneaks in, naturally. A tripping dancer, a prank with a tossed ribbon, a witty remark about the mayor's new hat. These moments humanize the spectacle, keeping the parade lively while reminding participants and spectators alike that the madam and her women are both performers and managers of chaos. You feel the tension and thrill mingling. One misstep could provoke moralists, angry neighbors, or city officials, yet careful management turns this risk into opportunity. Clients are impressed, the city is entertained, and the women enjoy a rare moment of outward recognition. The street becomes a stage, the crowd a temporary court of both judgment and admiration, and the madam is its master. As you watch, it's clear that carnival parades are more than celebration. They are an exercise in social navigation, public relations, and authority. The madam wields visibility as power, transforming the chaos of the streets into a demonstration of her control, charm, and strategic acumen. In this fleeting moment, the brothel isn't just a place of commerce, it's a symbol of influence, resilience, and the delicate balance of danger and delight. The carnival fades as dusk deepens into night, and you return to the interior of the brothel, where the hum of conversation and the clink of coin resumes its steady rhythm. But now, you notice the invisible lines marking legality, the thin, fragile boundaries that dictate who may enter, who may leave, and what may be allowed inside these walls. Running a brothel in medieval Europe was never simply a matter of hospitality. It was an exercise in legal gymnastics, performed constantly by women who knew that a single misstep could cost them everything. A mainstream historical fact. In many cities, municipal authorities issued detailed regulations regarding brothel operations. Rules governed hours of operation, acceptable client behavior, fees, and sometimes even the conduct of the workers. Madams had to know these ordinances inside and out, as city officials could revoke licenses for infractions ranging from unregistered patrons to improper conduct. Legal compliance wasn't optional, it was survival. Yet, as usual, quirks emerge. Some madams developed clever ways to skirt minor restrictions without technically breaking the law. In parts of Germany, for example, brothel owners might advertise rooms for hire with veiled language or indirect signage to avoid drawing the attention of particularly strict moral enforcers. You can picture a small hand-painted sign hinting at services while technically complying with city mandates, a wink at those in the know, a shield against those in power. Historians still argue whether these women truly had autonomy in navigating these legal gray zones, or if the system simply forced them into a constant cycle of obedience and subterfuge. Either way, you see the careful dance unfolding. The madam ensures compliance just enough to avoid trouble, while leveraging loopholes to maintain profit, discretion, and safety. The threat of enforcement always lingers. A dissatisfied neighbor, a suspicious guard, or a sudden city inspection could transform a seemingly secure night into a legal nightmare. You watch as the madam moves with a subtle authority, checking her registers, observing interactions, and preemptively addressing minor disputes before they escalate. Every conversation, every glance, every whispered warning is a strategy to maintain order and legality. And humor slips in once again. The madam might quietly rib a new worker about keeping your ledger as neat as your hair, or chuckle at the absurdity of city rules dictating the precise number of patrons allowed per room. Even amid tension, small moments of levity diffuse pressure and reinforce social hierarchies within the house. You realize that these legal maneuvers are more than risk management. They are expressions of power. The madam isn't merely obeying regulations. She's mastering them, understanding their limits, and bending them just enough to protect her household. This constant negotiation requires intelligence, diplomacy, and foresight, all performed under the scrutiny of both authorities and patrons. By now, it becomes clear that the law is not simply an external force, it's part of the very architecture of the brothel. The madam's ability to navigate this thin line between legality and violation shapes every decision, every transaction, every relationship within the house. And as the candles flicker in the hall, you sense that this delicate balance of compliance, strategy, and foresight is what separates survival from ruin in the shadowed corridors of medieval urban life. The distant chatter of the city fades into the background as your attention shifts to the newcomers, the women who arrive from far-off towns, distant kingdoms, even beyond familiar borders. You notice the subtle differences immediately. Accents that curve unfamiliar, clothing that suggests different styles or materials, small habits and gestures that mark them as outsiders. In the brothel, these women are more than workers. They are objects of fascination, curiosity, and sometimes mistrust. They bring both opportunity and risk, and the madam must navigate these arrivals carefully. A mainstream historical fact: many medieval European cities saw the influx of women from neighboring regions or even across seas to work in brothels. Some were voluntarily seeking employment. Others were fleeing poverty, displacement, or coercion. Their presence could enhance the prestige or allure of a house, drawing wealthier or more exotic-minded patrons. And yet, quirky tidbits abound. In some records, new arrivals were expected to demonstrate unusual skills such as dancing, singing, or storytelling before being fully integrated into the house. Some madams kept small ritualistic welcoming ceremonies that involved incense, a symbolic gift, or a mock trial of aptitude and almost theatrical initiation blending fun, evaluation, and hierarchy. Imagine a young woman nervously reciting a poem in front of the seasoned staff, hoping to impress both the madam and her peers. Historians still argue whether this movement of women was primarily economic or coercive. Did migration empower women with mobility and opportunity? Or were they pawns in a larger system that exploited poverty and social vulnerability? The answer varies by region and individual circumstance, and it's impossible to generalize entirely. The madam's role in integrating these newcomers is critical. She observes interactions carefully, manages potential conflicts, and positions new workers in ways that maximize both income and social harmony. A misstep, an untrained or unruly worker, an outsider who resists the house's hierarchy can ripple through the establishment, threatening both reputation and safety. You see her offering gentle guidance to one of the new arrivals, adjusting her posture or her approach to patrons, teaching her the subtle choreography that keeps the house functioning. And humor persists even in this delicate process. Quirky tidbit. Some madams would assign amusing nicknames to newcomers based on minor quirks or initial missteps. The Sparrow, Red Ribbon, or Stumbling Lily, creating both a sense of belonging and a reminder of the learning curve ahead. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A dropped tray, a mispronounced greeting, a newcomer startled by a particularly loud patron. These small moments ease tension and subtly reinforce authority. Integration also comes with social risks. Xenophobia, rivalry with established staff, or differing cultural norms could create friction. The madam must anticipate and mitigate these tensions, ensuring that each new woman understands both her responsibilities and the unspoken codes that govern behavior in the house. This is management at its most subtle, blending mentorship, diplomacy, and occasionally mild intimidation. By the time the lanterns are refilled and the music swells, you notice that these newcomers are no longer outsiders. They move through the house with a growing familiarity, guided by the madam's careful hand, yet still acutely aware of the precariousness of their position. The delicate balance between inclusion and control, between opportunity and danger, is as finely tuned as the lighting in the hall. In this way, the madam extends her influence beyond the walls of her office, shaping not only the economy and legality of her house, but the very social fabric of the community within. The evening grows deeper. and the house seems to breathe with its own rhythm, the shuffle of feet, the soft clinking of cups, the murmur of conversations tucked into shadowed corners. You notice the subtle movements that indicate hierarchy. A worker hesitates at the edge of the hall before entering, waiting for a signal from the madam. Another leans casually near a patron, yet her body language subtly communicates allegiance to the house rather than the client. Here, social intelligence is as valuable as any coin or license. Mainstream historical fact. Madams in medieval Europe often acted as arbiters and diplomats within their own households. They resolved disputes between workers, negotiated conflicts among clients, and even mediated disagreements with neighbors or rival households. This role was crucial to the survival of the establishment, as unrest could quickly attract legal or moral scrutiny. Quirky detail. Some brothels reportedly kept conflict corners, small, slightly secluded areas where disagreements could be aired safely, away from patrons and main traffic. It wasn't official policy. It was a strategy born of experience, allowing tempers to cool while the madam subtly observed and controlled the outcome. You can almost imagine a worker storming into this corner, flustered, only to find the madam calmly guiding the discussion with measured words and strategic glances. Historians still argue whether these internal power dynamics truly empowered workers or were merely tools for maintaining the madam's ultimate control. The nuances are subtle. Loyalty and compliance were earned through negotiation, threat, and reward in equal measure. You notice how the madam's authority extends through gesture and tone, a language of quiet power that rarely requires raised voices. Even humor plays a strategic role. A mischievous nickname, a playful tease, or an inside joke can diffuse tension, build camaraderie, and subtly reinforce hierarchy. Free laughs in 1,000 words. A worker dramatically overreacting to a spilled drink, a patron misunderstanding instructions, and a sly comment from the madam about the city council's obsession with taxes. These moments humanize the environment while keeping control firmly in her hands. You realize that control in the house isn't just about finances or legality, it's about psychology. Reading subtle cues, anticipating conflicts, and guiding interactions allow the madam to maintain a delicate balance between authority and goodwill. Each decision where a worker stands, how a client is greeted, which conversation is allowed to continue is calculated, part of a continuous negotiation that shapes the daily life of the brothel. And yet, danger never entirely disappears. A dispute mishandled, a patron offended, or a neighbor irritated could ripple outward, attracting attention from guards, clergy, or rival houses. The madam's skill lies in her ability to anticipate, redirect, and manage these situations before they escalate. You watch her move through the hall, a subtle signal here, a calm word there, weaving order from chaos. In this dim, lively environment, you recognize that the madam's authority is an art. It is earned, negotiated, and continually reinforced. Her ability to navigate human behavior, anticipating conflict, guiding relationships, and shaping the culture of her house is as critical as her legal or financial acumen. In a world fraught with danger and opportunity, this soft power becomes her most reliable tool, ensuring the survival and success of both her household and herself. By now, the house has settled into a quieter rhythm. Patrons linger less, conversations drift into low murmurs, and the soft scrape of chairs on the stone floor marks the slow wind down of the night. It's in this lull that the madam's authority becomes most apparent. She moves among the rooms, checking on her workers, tallying the day's earnings, and ensuring that the order she has meticulously orchestrated remains intact even as fatigue and distraction creep in. You sense that these quieter moments are as critical as the bustle they are when the subtle threads of control are reinforced. A mainstream historical fact. In many medieval brothels, madams were responsible not only for daily operations but also for record keeping and long-term planning. Ledger books often included entries on earnings, expenses, fines, and even incidents that might later be needed in legal disputes. The madam's ability to maintain meticulous records could determine her survival in the face of city inspections or conflicts with patrons or authorities. And quirky tidbit, Some madams developed elaborate mnemonic systems for remembering patrons' preferences, payment habits, and even temperaments. They might use knots in strings, colored beads, or subtle gestures to keep track of dozens of individuals, blending human memory with clever organizational hacks that feel surprisingly modern. You can almost see a worker tapping a hidden bead to signal a familiar client's entrance, as if passing a secret-coded message. Historians still argue whether these record-keeping and memory techniques gave madams genuine leverage or simply helped them avoid penalties imposed by authorities. What's clear is that maintaining detailed knowledge of both the internal and external environment was essential to balancing profitability, legal compliance, and safety. You notice the madam glancing at her ledgers with a practiced eye, her mental calculations moving faster than the quill could ever record. Her oversight extends to health and hygiene as well. Workers' well-being, though constrained by medieval understanding, was a concern, since illness could halt earnings and draw scrutiny from authorities. Herbal remedies, vinegar washes, and the occasional ritual of rest in a safe room were part of her toolkit. Quirky tidbit. Some madams even encouraged small exercise routines or dancing rituals to keep their staff limber and energized. A combination of superstition, practicality, and morale building. Humor softens the routine too. A worker joking about the strange taste of imported wine, a madam teasing a young apprentice about miscounted coins, or laughter at a cat that has sneaked into the hallway. 3 laughs and 1,000 words. A tripping servant, a misfired bell for a patron, a mock complaint about city ordinances. Even the smallest amusements serve to reinforce bonds, lighten tension, and subtly reassert the madam's control. You realize that these quiet, seemingly mundane operations, recording transactions, monitoring health, managing memory, and diffusing minor irritations, are the backbone of the house. Authority is exercised not just in public commands, but in private attentiveness, foresight, and an uncanny ability to anticipate challenges before they arise. In this dimly lit room, the madam's power is both visible and invisible, as pervasive as the smell of wax and wine, and as vital as the coins clinking quietly in her ledger. The night deepens further, and outside, the city grows quieter. You notice the hushed sounds of footfalls on cobblestones, a distant dog barking, and the soft rustle of leaves in the alley. Inside, the brothel's activity begins to shift again. The madam's focus now extends beyond her staff and patrons to the neighborhood itself. Protecting the house doesn't stop at the door. It includes maintaining relationships with neighbors, guards, guilds, and even rival madams. Influence and diplomacy are as crucial as legal licenses and financial acumen. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval towns, brothel owners often had to negotiate with neighbors and city authorities to prevent complaints, violence, or interference. This included paying bribes, maintaining quiet hours, or resolving disputes between patrons and local merchants. Brothels functioned within a complex network of civic and social obligations, where survival depended on careful management of these relationships. A quirky detail. In some regions, madams would deliver small gifts to neighbors or local guilds, a basket of bread, a jug of wine, or even a harmless token like a carved figurine to smooth over tensions and signal goodwill. Imagine a small procession moving quietly through the alleys at night, the madam balancing a crate of pastries while glancing for guards or curious onlookers. These gestures were practical but also subtly performative, asserting the house's place in the social ecosystem. Historians still argue whether such social maneuvering genuinely conferred power or simply ensured temporary tolerance. Was this clever diplomacy or merely an elaborate survival strategy under constant scrutiny? Either way, the madam had to maintain this delicate web of influence to keep the house functional and profitable. Even guards and city officials could become allies if courted carefully. A wink, a coin, or a well-timed favor could prevent harassment or inspections. You notice how the madam subtly signals to a passing watchman, acknowledging his presence without inviting undue familiarity. She operates on multiple levels, simultaneously observing her staff, entertaining patrons, and managing external relations with almost imperceptible gestures. And humor, naturally, finds its way in. A neighbor playfully grumbling about noise, A guard joking about the scent of spiced wine wafting into the alley. A worker teasing a new recruit about carrying gifts too conspicuously. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A spilled basket of pastries. A cat darting between legs. A patron misreading a polite gesture. Even these small comic moments serve as social glue, easing tension while reinforcing the madam's subtle authority. You realize that a brothel's survival hinges not just on internal management, but also on this extended diplomacy. The madam functions as an ambassador, negotiator, and sometimes even a strategist, ensuring that the house is tolerated, protected, and respected. Her influence extends beyond walls, touching the streets, the authorities, and the community, turning potential threats into manageable elements. As you linger in this quiet, shadowed space, it's clear that the madam's reach is invisible but extensive. She orchestrates an entire social ecosystem, balancing danger, opportunity, and perception with uncanny skill. In this nocturnal world, authority is as much about subtle gestures and well-timed gifts as it is about rules, coins, or even fear. And the brothel thrives precisely because she understands this. By now, the night has fully claimed the city, and the distant hum of commerce has faded into silence. Inside, the brothel feels cocooned from the outside world, a self-contained universe where time is measured not by bells or market hours, but by the flow of patrons, coins, and subtle social negotiations. You notice the madam seated at a small desk in a corner, quill in hand, scribbling into a ledger, her eyes occasionally flicking to the doorway. Even at this late hour, her attention is everywhere, at once. Finances, staff, patrons, and the ever-present web of external relations. Mainstream historical fact. In cities like Paris and London, municipal authorities required madams to maintain detailed records of their establishment. These included ledgers of income, expenditures, patrons' names, and even minor incidents. Such documentation could be critical in legal disputes or inspections, and failure to maintain them properly could result in fines, closure, or worse. You see the madam treating her ledger as both a shield and a weapon, proof of compliance, proof of diligence, proof of survival. Quirky tidbit. Some madams used mnemonic rhymes or small symbols in their ledgers, not just for efficiency, but as a subtle code to track patrons' quirks, favorite drinks, or behavioral tendencies. Imagine a small symbol that looks like a star but signals that a particular client is easily flustered or unusually generous, a kind of medieval CRM system. It's both practical and whimsical, showing how resourceful these women were. Historians still argue whether the precision of such records represented genuine administrative autonomy or merely a form of compliance dictated by authorities. Regardless, it's clear that mastery over data coins, patrons, incidents was a cornerstone of the madam's authority. You notice her pausing to glance at a worker adjusting candles, noting the light's effect on perception and presentation, a subtle blend of artistry and management. Even the physical layout of the house is a tool. Rooms closer to the entrance are for casual patrons. Private chambers tucked away ensure discretion for higher-paying clients. The madam's oversight ensures that this spatial choreography operates seamlessly, guiding movement, mood, and even behavior. Small interventions, a rearranged chair, a tilted lantern, a quiet word to a worker control both perception and action with remarkable subtlety. Humor threads through even these meticulous operations. A candle flame sputtering, a coin clinking loudly against the floor, a worker joking about the quill's ink. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. The madam quipping about a client's forgetfulness, a worker spilling wine, a candle leaning precariously. These small moments remind you that authority doesn't always require severity. Levity can reinforce hierarchy while humanizing the environment. You realize the madam's power isn't just physical or financial, it's informational, spatial, and psychological. She orchestrates coins, bodies, rooms, and even time itself, ensuring the smooth functioning of a complex microcosm. In a world where a misstep could spell ruin, her ability to integrate records, space, and personnel into a cohesive system demonstrates extraordinary skill, blending pragmatism, foresight, and subtle control. And as you watch, you notice the quiet satisfaction in her gaze. Every detail accounted for, every potential conflict anticipated, every whisper and glance managed. This is the unseen authority that sustains the house, protects her staff, and keeps the fragile ecosystem of pleasure and power humming through the night. The first hints of dawn creep into the city, pale light reflecting off damp cobblestones, and inside, the brothel begins to transition again. Patrons thin out, exhausted or satisfied, leaving the madam to oversee the aftermath. Coins counted, rooms tidied, and the subtle rituals of closure observed. It's a quieter, more introspective time, and you notice that the madam's work never truly stops. Authority here is not a momentary display. It is continuous, extending into every corner of the house, every whisper, every movement. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, madams were responsible for cleaning, organizing, and maintaining the establishment at the start and end of each day. Hygiene and order weren't merely about comfort. They were linked to safety, reputation, and municipal compliance. Patrons and authorities alike judged the house by its upkeep, and neglect could invite fines or moral condemnation. A quirky detail. Some brothels kept morning rituals that involved not only cleaning but playful routines like rearranging cushions in a precise pattern or tapping a drum to mark the start of the day. These small acts reinforced hierarchy and structure while keeping workers alert and engaged. Imagine a worker jumping slightly as a drum taps the rhythm, aware that this is both ceremony and subtle rehearsal in obedience. Historians still argue whether these morning routines were truly practical or mostly symbolic, serving to reinforce the madam's authority and maintain discipline. Either way, they demonstrate the pervasive attention to order required in running a successful house. You notice the madam inspecting the rooms, a gentle word here, a slight nod there, guiding staff in a choreography that blends efficiency with subtle social signaling. Financial oversight continues even in these quiet hours. The madam tallies the night's earnings, compares them to expected income, and notes any discrepancies or unusual behaviors. A missing coin, a skipped tab, or a suspicious interaction could become a legal or financial problem if unchecked. Quirky tidbit. Some madams kept small, hidden compartments for emergency funds or bribes, tucked under floorboards or behind panels, a precautionary habit that demonstrates how closely strategy and survival were intertwined. And humor persists, soft and understated. A worker humming off-key while sweeping, a cat chasing a stray ribbon, a whispered joke about a patron who fell asleep mid-conversation. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A candle tilting dangerously, a tripping servant, a quip about the city council's obsession with evening noise. These moments humanize the space, relieve tension, and reinforce bonds without undermining the madam's authority. You begin to see that dawn is a testing ground where vigilance is measured in subtleties, the placement of objects, the order of tasks, and the calibration of authority. Every decision shapes the house's resilience, ensures compliance, and protects staff. The madam's power is both visible and invisible, evident in her presence, yet reinforced through ritual, observation, and strategic intervention. By the time the city begins to awaken outside, the brothel is already in motion again, humming with quiet efficiency. In this transitional space between night and day, you grasp the full extent of her role: organizer, protector, strategist, and subtle manipulator of social and spatial dynamics. Authority here is not declared with loud commands. It is sustained through attentiveness, intelligence, and a continuous rhythm of oversight that ensures survival, profit, and the delicate equilibrium of her small universe. The morning light spreads slowly across the quarter, revealing a city that feels almost innocent compared to the nocturnal world you've been observing. Yet the brothel does not pause for daybreak. It shifts focus, adapting to a different rhythm of clients, neighbors, and municipal oversight. You notice the madam moving through the quieter hallways with a different energy now, still watchful, but negotiating a subtler kind of influence that stretches beyond the walls into the broader urban ecosystem. A mainstream historical fact. Daytime inspections by city officials or clergy were a common feature in many European cities. Madams were expected to demonstrate compliance with ordinances, hygiene standards, and worker conduct. Failing an inspection could mean fines, temporary closure, or other punitive measures. You can see how every corner of the house has been arranged with careful intention candles positioned, furniture aligned, rooms clean, ensuring both comfort and defensibility. Quirky detail. In some towns, inspectors were entertained with tea, pastries, or small performances from the staff before conducting their formal review. Imagine the delicate balancing act, politeness and charm mixed with a strategic display of order, subtly communicating competence without overstepping moral boundaries. You notice the madam guiding a worker through a curtsy rehearsal, ensuring that the inspector sees a display of decorum that borders on theatrical. Historians still argue whether these interactions empowered madams or constrained them within performative roles designed by civic authorities. Regardless, the ability to navigate these moments with poise was crucial. The madam must present an image of discipline and respectability while subtly signaling the house's internal autonomy. You notice how her posture, eye contact, and gentle nods coordinate staff behavior, all while projecting authority to outsiders. Even humor plays a role in daytime diplomacy. A worker might quietly make a pun about the inspector's powdered wig, or a cat's sudden leap sparks a shared laugh among staff. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A teacup teetering perilously. A worker tripping on the threshold. A whispered joke about municipal obsession with cleanliness. These small moments diffuse tension while reinforcing the social bonds and hierarchy of the household. The madam also uses daytime hours for strategic planning. She evaluates schedules, forecasts income, and considers patron preferences. This is an ongoing negotiation of risk, revenue, and reputation. External threats, rival houses, envious neighbors, or unpredictable officials require subtle, often invisible measures. She may adjust the house's routines, shift staffing patterns, or even discreetly alter signage to accommodate shifting city regulations. You see that survival in this world depends on vigilance, foresight, and subtle manipulation. Authority is exercised not through force alone, but through a continuous, almost imperceptible orchestration of space, behavior, and perception. By mid-morning, the house hums with quiet order, a testament to the madam's skill in blending legality, diplomacy, and domestic management. And as you observe, it becomes clear that the brothel operates as a microcosm of the city itself, a network of commerce, politics, social interaction, and strategy, all overseen by a woman whose authority is both fragile and absolute, contingent on her ability to balance human, social, and civic forces with intelligence and poise. By mid-morning, the house begins to shift yet again. Daylight brings a different clientele, a quieter energy, and the subtle business of maintenance, recruitment, and preparation for the next evening. You notice the madam moving with a practiced rhythm, checking ledgers, assigning tasks, and observing interactions with a keen eye that misses nothing. Even the smallest gestures, a glance, a tilt of the head, a subtle nod carry weight, signaling authority and maintaining the invisible hierarchy that governs every corner of the house. Mainstream historical fact. In many European cities, madams were responsible for recruitment and training of new workers. This included teaching them how to interact with clients, navigate the social codes of the house, and maintain the decorum expected by municipal authorities. Training could last weeks, blending practical instruction with subtle social conditioning to ensure both safety and profitability. Quirky tidbit. Some madams employed creative techniques to test new workers' readiness, from mock interactions with friendly staff posing as clients to playful skill challenges involving dance, storytelling, or memory games. You can almost see a nervous recruit attempting to balance coins while reciting a poem under the watchful yet amused gaze of the madam. Historians still argue whether these methods empowered women or reinforced dependency on the madam's authority. In practice, it seems to have been a mix of both. Workers gained skills and confidence while remaining under the careful oversight of a central figure whose knowledge and strategy were critical to the house's survival. Even humor is woven into this training. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A spilled cup of tea, a worker mispronouncing a city official's name, a playful jab from the madam about an overly dramatic gesture. These moments ease tension, foster camaraderie, and subtly reinforce hierarchy without harshness. You notice the madam also keeps an eye on maintenance and supplies. Clean linens, fresh candles, and tidy furnishings are more than aesthetic. They are signals of competence, authority, and care. Quirky tidbit. In some cities, madams maintain small herb gardens or homemade potions, using scents and minor remedies to enhance ambiance and health. It's a mix of practicality and showmanship, reinforcing her image as a competent and resourceful manager. The broader city still matters. Rival houses, guild disputes, and municipal oversight continue to influence her decisions. She anticipates potential conflicts, manages alliances, and negotiates with neighboring authorities, all while maintaining the internal rhythm of her staff and clients. Her power, though subtle, extends beyond the walls of the brothel into the streets, offices, and social networks of the city. By the time the sun reaches its peak, you realize that running a brothel is an exercise in constant attention, strategy, and negotiation. The madam balances economics, legality, social order, and human behavior with remarkable skill. In this blend of diplomacy, surveillance, and mentorship, you see how authority and survival are inseparable, and how subtle power, quiet, continuous, and nuanced, ensures that both her household and her position remain secure. Afternoon stretches lazily across the city, and the brothel shifts yet again. The noise of early morning trades and street vendors softens, replaced by the hum of domestic errands, deliveries, and the occasional curious passerby. You notice the madam moving like a conductor through an orchestra, invisible threads of influence guiding every interaction. Here, her authority manifests less through overt oversight and more through reputation, anticipation, and subtle management of perception. A mainstream historical fact. In many medieval towns, madams were expected to cultivate not only their household but also their public reputation. The image projected to the surrounding community neighbors, guilds, and local authorities was often as important as the internal order of the house itself. Compliance with social norms, visible tidiness, and polite interactions with the public help prevent complaints and protect the establishment's license. And quirky tidbit. Some madams develop subtle advertising strategies during daylight hours, such as hanging fresh flowers in windows, maintaining clean and attractive facades, or quietly displaying signs of prosperity like painted shutters or polished brass. It was a low-key form of marketing designed to attract certain patrons while maintaining discretion and decorum. You can almost see a worker carefully arranging blooms, aware that perception is as crucial as any legal compliance. Historians still argue whether these public-facing strategies represented genuine autonomy or simply an extension of the city's surveillance. Either way, the madam's attention to detail demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of optics, reputation, and influence. She orchestrates both internal behavior and external impressions simultaneously, balancing subtle signals to reinforce her authority. The afternoon also allows for internal audits. Checking inventories, verifying that supplies, candles, linens, herbs, and small luxuries are in place for the evening rush, and assessing staff readiness. Quirky tidbit. Some houses kept playful inventory games to train workers in memory and accuracy, turning mundane tasks into exercises that sharpened both skill and attentiveness. Imagine a worker secretly timing herself stacking linens, while the madam watches, amused, noting precision and initiative. And humor again threads through daily routines. A mischievous cat knocking over a small pile of coins, a worker exaggerating a gesture to mimic a patron, a whispered joke about the mayor's latest eccentric decree. 3 laughs in 1,000 words, a candle flickering unexpectedly, a playful stumble, an over-the-top curtsy. Laughter humanizes the work, softens tension, and subtly reinforces hierarchy while reminding everyone of shared bonds. You start to see the brothel as a dynamic ecosystem. Interior order, public perception, economic management, and human behavior all interwoven, maintained by a single orchestrator whose authority relies on observation, strategy, and subtle social manipulation. By mid-afternoon, you realize the madam's influence extends beyond the walls, touching the streets, neighbors, and even the rhythms of local commerce, blending diplomacy, foresight, and careful management into an invisible yet powerful network. Her power is continuous, exercised in silence as much as in speech, in gesture as much as in decision. She maintains not only a household, but a microcosm of order, safety, and commerce, in a world where risk and opportunity walk hand in hand. In this quiet, measured afternoon, you finally see the extent of her mastery. Every interaction, every glance, every carefully managed. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, and the brothel shifts again, preparing for the night's crescendo. You notice the change in energy. Workers straighten, candles are replaced or trimmed, and the madam moves with deliberate intent through each room, her presence a quiet signal that the evening's rhythm is about to begin. Authority here is not announced, it is felt. A subtle orchestration of bodies, movement, and anticipation. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval European cities, brothels had set schedules that dictated opening hours, peak service times, and closing procedures. Madams had to coordinate staffing, client flow, and compliance with municipal regulations, ensuring that both the household and the business operated smoothly. Timing was as much a form of control as financial or legal management. Quirky detail. Some madams use small, personalized signals to coordinate staff, a discreet bell, a patterned cloth, or even a tap on a table. These subtle cues directed movement, alerted workers to clients, or indicated changes in routine, creating an almost choreographed system that ran quietly in the background. You can imagine a worker catching the signal and adjusting her position, unseen by patrons yet fully responsive to the house's rhythm. Historians still argue whether these orchestrated signals gave madams genuine leverage over their staff or simply reinforced dependency. Either way, the effectiveness of these cues relied on careful observation, trust, and precise timing, demonstrating the madam's skill in social management. The evening also brings increased interaction with external forces. Patrons arrive in larger numbers, neighbors glance curiously, and city officers sometimes patrol nearby. The madam balances openness with discretion, maintaining her authority while signaling respectability to those outside. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, madams train staff to subtly adjust lighting, curtains, or music to create an impression of decorum and order when officials were near, blending optics with control in a sophisticated, almost theatrical way. Humor continues to provide balance. A worker teasing another about fumbling a candle, a small prank with a decorative item, or a whispered joke about the quirks of a regular patron. 3 laughs in 1,000 words, a candle tilting, a miscounted coin, a dramatic gesture exaggerated for effect. These moments relieve tension, reinforce social bonds, and subtly remind everyone of the madam's presence and oversight. By late afternoon, the madam is already strategizing for the night, anticipating client preferences, arranging staff rotations, and adjusting the house's presentation to optimize both revenue and safety. Authority here is a blend of foresight, observation, and subtle guidance, exercised continuously to maintain the delicate equilibrium of the establishment. You begin to see that running the brothel is less about coercion and more about orchestration, guiding interactions, managing perception, and maintaining an intricate network of relationships that spans inside and outside the walls. Her power, though quietly exercised, is pervasive, felt in every glance, every gesture, and every arrangement she oversees. The house, like a finely tuned instrument, responds to her touch, ready to hum with controlled energy as night falls. Night has fully arrived, cloaking the city in a velvet darkness punctuated by flickering lanterns and distant tavern sounds. Inside the brothel, the atmosphere hums with anticipation. and you feel the subtle shift from daytime management to nocturnal orchestration. The madam moves through the rooms, her presence commanding yet unspoken, ensuring that every detail from staff positioning to room readiness is perfectly aligned for the evening's rhythm. Authority at this hour is invisible but absolute, a combination of preparation, observation, and anticipation. A mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, brothels often experienced their highest activity after dark. Madams had to coordinate staff, client interactions, and house operations with precision. Efficient management directly affected both profitability and safety, particularly in cities where licensed houses were under scrutiny from authorities, rival establishments, and moral overseers. Quirky tidbit. Some madams maintained signal systems using subtle sounds or gestures to communicate across rooms without alerting patrons. A small cough, a flick of a curtain, or a bell's discreet chime could indicate a problem, a change in schedule, or the arrival of a specific client. You can almost see the synchronized dance unfold, staff responding seamlessly to cues invisible to anyone outside the orchestrated network. Historians still argue whether this level of control represents empowerment for the madam or reflects the constant pressure of operating under societal scrutiny. Regardless, the skill required to manage multiple human, financial, and legal variables simultaneously is undeniable. You notice how the madam anticipates potential conflicts between patrons among staff or with the surrounding neighborhood and mitigates them before they escalate. Even humor finds its place. A worker tripping lightly on a rug, a whispered joke about the quirks of a regular client, a playful exchange about a misplaced candle, 3 laughs in 1,000 words, a candle flame sputtering, a minor faux pas handled gracefully, a mischievous cat weaving through legs. These moments humanize the environment while reinforcing the hierarchy and subtly reminding everyone who holds the reins of authority. Tonight, her focus extends beyond the house to the broader urban landscape. She considers rival brothels, municipal inspections, and neighborhood relations, adjusting the house's operation to anticipate external pressures. Quirky tidbit. Some madams even timed music or lighting to mask sounds from outside, cleverly mitigating complaints while maintaining ambiance and flow. You realize that the madam's power is both pervasive and invisible. Every glance, gesture, and arrangement is a calculated exertion of control, ensuring safety, efficiency, and profitability. She orchestrates a complex ecosystem where subtle social cues, operational precision, and careful management of perception converge. In this nocturnal world, authority is not demanded, it is sustained, woven into every shadow, sound, and movement, allowing the house to operate seamlessly despite the inherent dangers and scrutiny of the outside world. The night deepens toward its quietest hours, and you notice the pace inside the brothel gradually slowing. Patrons leave, exhausted or satisfied, while the remaining staff attend to the lingering tasks, tidying rooms, counting coins, and sharing quiet moments of camaraderie. The madam's presence now shifts again from orchestrator of constant motion to guardian of the house's after-hours equilibrium. Here, her authority is exercised subtly through observation, gentle guidance, and the quiet enforcement of rules that have governed the night's flow. Mainstream historical fact. Many brothel madams in medieval Europe were tasked with maintaining order during slow periods and after patrons had left. Responsibilities included ensuring cleanliness, monitoring the well-being of workers, and preparing the house for the next day. This after-hours management was crucial for both legal compliance and long-term sustainability. A quirky tidbit. Some madams instituted playful rituals for the night's end. Workers would ring small bells or perform humorous inspection dances while checking linens or counting supplies. These ceremonies served to reinforce hierarchy, engage the staff, and provide a lighthearted transition from intense activity to quiet order. You can picture a worker tripping over a broomstick, laughter echoing softly, the madam's calm smile signaling both authority and indulgence. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily practical or symbolic, a combination of morale building and subtle reinforcement of hierarchy. Regardless, they reveal the madam's skill in blending authority with empathy, structure with levity. Even in mundane routines, she cultivates a sense of cohesion, predictability, and subtle social control. You notice the careful attention to resources. Candles are replenished, linens folded, and coins secured. Quirky tidbit. Some madams maintained small emergency stashes, hidden coins, or basic supplies, ensuring the house could weather unexpected inspections or financial hiccups. This meticulous foresight demonstrates how survival, strategy, and subtle authority were intertwined in every decision. Humor persists even in these quieter hours. A mischievous cat chasing a trailing ribbon, a worker joking about a patron's peculiar habits, or a whispered pun about city regulations. 3 laughs in 1,000 words. A tipped candle, a startled worker, a playful mock dispute over last night's events. These moments ease tension and reinforce both camaraderie and social structure. You begin to sense the full scope of the madam's mastery. She orchestrates every facet of the house, from finances to personnel, from safety to morale, all while maintaining discretion and influence over external observers. Authority here is invisible yet omnipresent, exercised through foresight, observation, and subtle guidance. In this deep night quiet, the brothel feels like a self-contained world where survival, order, and human connection are continuously negotiated under. The city outside is hushed, the streets glimmering with dew and moonlight, and inside, the brothel has settled into a soft, reflective quiet. You notice the final tasks of the night unfolding with a gentle rhythm. Coins counted and secured, candles extinguished with care, and the last of the workers preparing for rest. The madam moves through these shadows, her presence a calm, invisible hand guiding the close of the day. Authority here is quiet but absolute, exercised in patience, foresight, and careful attention to every detail. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval brothels, madams were responsible for the comprehensive closure of the house, including securing valuables, checking for compliance with municipal ordinances, and ensuring the safety and well-being of staff. Their oversight extended beyond business into the practical and emotional needs of the household, balancing safety, morale, and preparedness for the next day. Quirky tidbit. Some madams kept small nocturnal journals, recording minor incidents, humorous anecdotes, or observations about patrons, staff, and city life. These notes were part record-keeping, part reflection, and occasionally part amusement, giving insight into the madam's personality and the house's social dynamics. You can picture her writing by candlelight, a quiet smile playing across her face at a remembered joke, or a subtle victory over a tricky situation. Historians still argue whether these reflective practices were a tool of empowerment, a coping mechanism, or a mix of both. What is clear is that the madam's influence was not confined to the visible and immediate. It extended into planning, strategizing, and anticipating the future, often in ways invisible to both patrons and authorities. Even humor threads through this final stage, a worker teasing another about miscounted coins, a cat's quiet antics, a soft joke whispered about the day's absurdities, 3 laughs in 1,000 words, a candle sputtering, a minor stumble in the hallway, a playful quip about city regulations. These small moments reinforce camaraderie, morale, and subtle social hierarchy, keeping bonds intact even in the quiet of night. You notice the madam pausing at each threshold, observing spaces she has curated, ensuring order, safety, and readiness. Every object, every candle, every placement reflects intention her authority exercised in the arrangement of her environment as much as in her interactions with staff or patrons. The house becomes both a sanctuary and a system, balancing comfort, commerce, and strategy in delicate equilibrium. In these final moments, you begin to understand the breadth of her role. The madam is strategist, guardian, diplomat, and mentor, continuously managing risk, perception, and human behavior. She negotiates with staff, patrons, and the broader city alike, weaving a complex web of influence that allows the house to survive, prosper, and maintain dignity in a society that often denied women autonomy. Her power is pervasive yet subtle, exercised in ways both visible and invisible, blending foresight, observation, and gentle authority to maintain order, safety, and human connection. Now that the house is quieted and the city sleeps under the soft silver of moonlight, you can let your mind drift along with the ebbing rhythms you've witnessed. Imagine the gentle flicker of candlelight fading into the soft shadows of empty rooms, the distant murmur of the night turning into silence, and the warm, steady presence of the madam as she moves through the house one last time. The energy of the day and night lingers faintly, a pulse that reassures even as it recedes. You can feel the layers of strategy, care, and subtle authority winding down, leaving only the soft comfort of continuity. The coins are counted, the rooms tidied, and every movement of the household has been guided with precision and thoughtfulness. There is a quiet satisfaction in knowing that every challenge has been anticipated, every risk mitigated, every interaction carefully balanced. It's a world of complexity now softened, where the tension has eased into a gentle rhythm, and you are allowed to simply observe and exhale. Picture the city outside, hushed and reflective, while the house rests, a sanctuary maintained by a woman whose vigilance never truly ends. Her influence lingers in every corner, every whisper, every carefully arranged detail, like a quiet heartbeat that assures stability and order. You feel the resonance of that skill, patience, and foresight, and the human warmth that threads through even the most pragmatic of actions. And now, as your own eyelids grow heavy, let the echoes of this world fade gently into your own imagination. The flickering shadows, the hushed voices, the subtle laughter all dissolve into calm. Rest with the knowledge that survival, strategy, and quiet authority have their own rhythm, one that can soothe and reassure as it carries into sleep. Let the gentle pulse of this hidden world lull you into serenity, leaving the city, the house, and the madam in peaceful balance.